We pulled it off, didn't we? Boris Johnson declared this morning, as he said, that he would unite the country and get Brexit done by the end of January next year, celebrating the biggest Tory majority since 1987. For Labour, with Jeremy Corbyn's political project left shredded amid their worst results since the 1930s, the search will now begin not just for a new leader, but a new purpose. And a night of disappointment for the Lib Dems too. Their former leader, Jo Swinson, one of the electoral casualties. Here's how the night went by the numbers. With just one seat left to declare, the Conservatives have 364 MPs. Labour has 203, fewer than Michael Foot won in the disastrous 1983 election. The SNP will have 48 seats and the Lib Dems just 11. All that means that Boris Johnson will enjoy a majority of 78. The Tories have gained 47 seats on the 2017 result, while Labour have lost 59. The SNP picked up 13, and the Lib Dems are down 1. Boris Johnson won just over 43% of the vote, only a slight improvement on Theresa May's performance, but Labour took just 32%, with the Lib Dems on 11%. The big story: Labour's vote share is down by nearly 8 percentage points. The Lib Dem vote did rise significantly, but not enough to win seats. And the key is where Labour's vote collapsed. Back in 2017, there was a so-called red wall of traditional Labour backing seats in the Midlands and the North East. That has fallen, with the Tories winning dozens of iconic former mining constituencies, some of which have never had a Conservative MP before. Well, our political editor, Gary Gibbon, is with me now. Busy night and one to remember, right?
Two seismic events, really. Brexit is now happening, and barring some unforeseen event, it is happening by the end of next month. The prolonged parliamentary mud wrestling to try and stop it has failed. The dream that some had of a second referendum is over. But there's another seismic event, and that's what you've been alluding to in that map there, the realignment of British politics. The Tory party was winning in Labour's heartlands. All the rules of political physics were turned over last night, and they were winning big in some of those places. Boris Johnson this morning saying that he knows that those voters have lent him their votes and he hopes to bring them over to his side. He knows that many of them have grandparents spinning in their grave for what they did yesterday at the polling station, and he's intent on trying to keep those people on side. When you win a big victory, you know it's a big victory when the other sides are looking for new leaders. And Jeremy Corbyn, as you said last night, saying that he blamed it on Brexit, and I think he had a nod at the media as well. Labour will be looking for a new leader, and then Jo Swinson defenestrated like that. We haven't had a leader. As a party leader, you're meant to be so prominent you don't lose your seat. Last time this happened, we think, was 1945, and her party has got to pick itself up off the ground. But in Scotland, as you said, there's the SNP picking up seats, the Tories rolling backwards, an enormous challenge ahead for Boris Johnson to try and smooth that one over. And in Northern Ireland, the DUP rolling backwards a bit. Another story that will unfurl under his premiership. Here's how Paul McNamara, our political correspondent, watched the night unfold.
Off to see the Queen after not just a victory, but a landslide, as traditional Labour seat after traditional Labour seat voted Conservative, giving Boris Johnson their best results since the 1980s. And the political landscape of the nation changed beyond recognition. The morning after the seismic night before began with a victory lap.
He walks into this room, a Prime Minister transformed, gone from being the leader of a zombie government to one with a thumping majority. And with that majority comes the freedom and the power to govern as he wishes.
So the question, just how will he want to govern? As the centrist One Nation Tory who was London mayor, or the man who reached out to the most Eurosceptic wings of the party? We may have got a glimpse during his victory speech.
I have a message to all those who voted for us yesterday, especially those who voted for us Conservatives, One Nation Conservatives, for the first time. You may only have lent us your vote, and you may not think of yourself as a natural Tory. Your hand may have quivered over the ballot paper, as before you put your cross in the Conservative box. And you may intend to return to Labour next time round. And if that is the case, I am humbled that you have put your trust in me and that you have put your trust in us. And I and we will never take your support for granted.
Susan Elizabeth Jungworth.
This moment was the first indicator of the true scale of Conservative victory.
Ian Levy, the Conservative Party candidate, 17,000.
Ian Levy winning Blythe Valley in the North East, which has been Labour ever since it was created in 1950. And then again and again, Labour strongholds fell to the Tories.
Fletcher Mark Peter, the Conservative Party candidate, 21,791.
In Bolsover, Labour's Dennis Skinner didn't even turn up to hear how he'd lost the seat he'd held since 1970. And in northwest Durham, a scene symbolic for many backbench MPs who feel the blame for this catastrophic loss lies with Jeremy Corbyn, as the woman many tipped to replace him, Laura Pidcock, lost her job. It wasn't with immediate effect, but at his own result in Islington North, Jeremy Corbyn effectively resigned as leader.
I want to also make it clear that I will not lead the party in any future general election campaign. I will discuss with our party to ensure there is a process now of reflection on this result and on the policies that the party will take going forward.
A resignation that can't come soon enough, according to Labour grandee and former Home Secretary Alan Johnson.
Corbyn was a disaster on the doorstep. Everyone knew that he couldn't lead the working class out of a paper bag.
Jo Swinson, Scottish Liberal Democrats.
It wasn't just a disastrous night for Labour.
23.
Those are SNP cheers. Jo Swinson was only elected party leader in July. Today, she's not even an MP. This was the moment SNP leader Nicola Sturgeon heard Jo Swinson's news. The SNP gained 13 MPs. They are now the third largest party in Parliament with 48 out of 59 Scottish seats. A result Miss Sturgeon says is a mandate for a second independence referendum. Not long ago, the Democratic Unionist Party were propping up the government. Last night in Northern Ireland, their Westminster leader Nigel Dodds lost his seat. And as of today, Northern Ireland now has more nationalist MPs than unionist ones. So just what will this result mean for the United Kingdom?
I think this is a huge responsibility for this new government. I think probably their largest priority, more than anything else, is holding the United Kingdom together. The SNP have picked up a lot of seats. It's going to be very, very difficult for them now. And they're going to have to fall over backwards to really make sure that people in Northern Ireland, people of Scotland, people of Wales really feel part of this project.
Boris Johnson went into this election saying a vote for him was a vote to get Brexit done. He now has a mandate so large he can do just that, and in fact, whatever else he wishes.
Paul McNamara reporting. Well, joining me now is Tobias Elwood, the Conservative MP for Bournemouth East. Congratulations.
Thank you.
So what won the election for you? Was it Boris Johnson or Jeremy Corbyn?
It was absolutely Boris Johnson, but of course we were helped by Jeremy Corbyn trying to promote a type of socialism that I don't think this nation is ready for. But you had Boris Johnson very determined, get Brexit done. You can't get clearer than that, and we now have a majority. I've come to work so many days prior to this election knowing how difficult it is to get legislation through. We now have a majority, we can pass legislation and we can move forward with Brexit.
You're going to get Brexit done, but you also, which will take quite a long time with all the trade negotiations, but what you also have to get done is to satisfy the expectations and needs of those working class voters in the so-called red wall who have lent you their votes.
You're absolutely right.
How are you going to do that?
Well, firstly, I'm really pleased to hear the Prime Minister recognise that in his very, very first speech. It's not good enough just for people like myself to retain our seats. The only way we're going to get a majority is by eating into those Labour heartlands. And it was interesting to hear Gary saying that you'd have Labourites turning in their grave. Well, that trust is only temporary, and the Prime Minister is determined to say we will change the infrastructure, we will put those hospitals where we said we would, we will actually earn your respect and your support so we can actually deserve to continue to be in government.
And so they can rely on those promises that were made during the election campaign, some of which, you know, many people would say had a fairly loose relationship with the truth.
But that is what democracy is all about. If we don't, then yes, we'll be back in opposition. But if we want to stay in government, our party has to change. What have you ever heard of a Prime Minister winning a general election, then turning to his own people or everybody, the nation, and saying our party must change? We must change because the profile, the complexion of our party now looks different than it did a week ago.
Does this now also mean that Boris Johnson can afford to ignore the very people who have been breathing down his predecessors' necks, the ERG, Eurosceptics in the Tory party?
No, because this is where the compromises come in. I voted to remain, but I'm content that I recognise I have to compromise, so this is the deal that I can then support. The ERG have backed that as well. Not only that,
they've lost a lot of power here, haven't they? They've lost a lot of power, haven't they?
Well, let's not forget that anybody who's in the ERG is firstly a member of the Conservative Party. And if they're a member of the Conservative Party, they need to be loyal to this Prime Minister.
But they were calling the shots before. They're no longer calling the shots now?
They weren't content, obviously, with Theresa May, defying expectations. Prime Minister went to Brussels, came back with a deal which not only satisfied the ERG and the rest of the party, it also managed to convince 20 Labour MPs as well.
With the SNP doing as well as it did in Scotland, we are now on a collision course for a constitutional crisis, are we not?
Well, you could read it that way. I don't believe that
she'll want a second referendum, won't she?
Of course she will, and that's their raison d'etre.
And he won't give it to her?
Absolutely not. We want to keep the union. We want to keep the country as it is. I believe that more people were voting SNP because they were minded to remain. What we need to do is prove to them, as it's been proved to me, that this working relationship we'll have with the EU will be good for Britain. If we can do that, we keep the union together.
She has already said that she'll go to the courts. As we said before, she wants that second referendum to take place sooner rather than later.
Of course she does, but she forgets that.
This is a crisis waiting to happen.
The first referendum, it was acknowledged by her own party that that was done for a generation. And now she's got some wind in her sails. She wants to do it all again. As I say, this is more to do with the fact that Scotland did vote Remain. We need to convince the people of Scotland to say, actually, stay with us, stay with the country, but also recognise that we can get a working relationship with Europe, which will be good for Scotland too.
What kind of Boris Johnson are we actually going to see as Prime Minister for the next few years?
Now that's
5 years.
I know that's a big question the media are asking, but take a look at how he conducted himself as mayor. Take a look at how many times he used that phrase, one nation, which is absolutely pivotal.
But these are very different Boris Johnsons, aren't they? The Mayor Boris Johnson and the one we've seen on the campaign trail.
Not at all. What we're seeing is somebody that's already said in his very first speech that we need to look beyond our base. We need to attract the support from right across the nation. Only by having that broad appeal, that broad church, are we going to remain in office, in government.
OK. Tobias Elwood, thank you very much indeed.